Hey everyone, welcome back to Naturally with Karen. This is a short live stream about avoidant, depressed, and envious behaviors. Now, what's happening right now is that in our world today is that many of our young people have been raised from baby formula to rice cereal, which Dr. Sabi spoke about so well. I want to thank Dr. Sabi. Bless up, Kim. I want to thank Dr. Sabi because he introduced such a poignant way of saying, if you're going to live on rice, you're going to end up, it's like eating glue. So our young babies, mamas are being, like I was, pushed to go back to work or lose their housing and not be able to have food. The other parent is missing in the household or grandparents are not functioning. What's happening is this avoidant, depressed, and envious behavior is coming from a lack, bless up Marlene, is coming from a lack of resources. If we would have continued to live in the ways of indigenous people before Aryan invasion, we would have never been in this situation. We would have never been in the situation where we needed to have banks, courts, prisons, jails, social workers, and everything else. It is a mass contrived reality which is not real. So now that it's here, and now that the grid is being erected, I want to bring your attention to the fact that a lot of young people are either playing games, or as I went to Aldi's today a little bit earlier, there was a little boy not more than 3 years old sitting in the cart and had a headphones on, staring at a game, and he was selecting the type of gun and weapon that he was going to use. Okay? This is pretty important because I was one of those parents that said, yes, I want you to have the Game Boy. I don't want mine to go without, A lot of that thinking was coming from envious behavior. I was envious that I didn't have grandparents on board for my son. I was envious that my beautiful, precious little boy didn't have a daddy that found him so special. I think because it's affecting us in some way or another, the only way that we're going to be able to really present solutions and work a plan is to be able to be absolutely direct and candid and honest. I was envious, and so that envy translated into my going out and buying my son things at a young age, even though I was working at a Waldorf school and I knew the ramifications, not to the degree that I know them today, because today I know them. So many times when I come to help people and say, please don't do that, or I'm thinking about coming to your eco-village and I see that your children are being given a cheese stick, Parmesan on their salad, and cheese puffs, I think to myself, I have already been through this, with raising a child on my own. I'm an elder now at 58 for many people, and I have elders to myself, thankfully. But I've already seen it play out. So your children can look really healthy and they can feel really healthy a part of the time. But if you're feeding them cheese, you're feeding them false ideas, they're sitting in front of a television, they're sitting in front of an iPad, before a certain age, and they're going to eventually end up with these avoidant behaviors. And let me say what that looks like, because I have a family member who's under 25 who rarely ever leaves the house, who couldn't go out and finish doing things that otherwise he would have been able to do. And I have other family members, that are coming in more and more and more, and they just think that this is just the way that it is. They don't know. They haven't seen what I've seen in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, before the 5G and 4G and 3G and all the different cell phone towers, okay? So avoidant behaviors are all these folks that they don't get back to you. You call them on the phone and they just texted you, but they don't pick up the phone and they don't answer, okay? Now, sometimes we do that because we're a business and we know that people will just bombard us nonstop, or we're on our way out the door and we did a quick text. But I'm talking about the people that you really need to have a conversation with, but they don't pick up the phone. Okay, they're becoming avoidant, but we didn't really have our finger on this. When my uncle Don Pringle developed throat cancer, is how it was put when I was a child. He had throat cancer, he was given 6 months to live. He eventually became very avoidant and anxious and depressed, and he took a 357 to his head. He ended up living 20 years past that diagnosis with throat cancer. I'm not sure what they did back then because I was very young. But now that I look back on my paternal grandmother Olive and how she would lay in the bed and then get up and cook, and she would say, you always start your meals with onions and garlic in the pan. And what a beautiful woman who in 1981 was prescribed Xanax the first year that it came out, and she would sneak a beer. She had the cans of beer in her closet, and eventually when I began driving and taking her to the store, I would say, Grandma, please don't get the alcohol. And to this day, you can't push or force me to have a beer or a glass of wine or champagne to celebrate the new year, because I have no interest in that trap whatsoever. I mean, I've been there, seen that. I had a couple of drinks in college just because I was like, well, I kind of want to try, they had fancy names or whatever. But I was like, no way. I saw that demise and I don't want to be a part of it. Right now, I subsist in a way that I can be the most absolutely free as possible. I am studying, I'm going outside, I'm sitting in front of my computer, I'm helping people, I'm getting the dogs out, 3 dogs to walk and getting out in nature today. And I want to live the most free life I can possibly live, meaning that I'm not chained to a job at 58 years old where I'm imbibing toxic energy all day long. So we're seeing more people create group homes, assisted living, hospices, more hospital wings. Now mega hospitals are going to be built. There's a mega hospital that's going to be built in Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth just welcomed all these folks from Chicago many years ago since I've been up here. And so a part of this is really transforming right in front of my eyes for 58 years. And so, your family members with anxiety and all the way to agoraphobia, my family members and the people that are shooting themselves in the face, the people with alcoholism and heroin addiction. Being at Soberfest yesterday was very, very eye-opening on many, many, many levels. I was so honored to be a part of Sober Squad and so just thrilled and enthralled with what they're doing for people. But at the same time, the catering that came was hot dogs, hamburgers, potato salad, dill pickle spears, and potato chips. And I got to thinking to myself as I was walking today, and I had spoken with Danielle Laporte, who lives up here, who's a Native American woman, and she was telling me, hopefully it's not confidential, but she goes, we were talking about foraging together, and I've seen her in person many times. And I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could just make some kind of food, because we were exploring different business ideas. And she said, what about cattail tamales? And I was like, hey, I take the Carlton Trail as I did today as well, and there was cattails abundant. In fact, I'm going to post a couple pictures of the cattails. And so I began, right, no good food choices. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're offering, and at the very end they had, and for someone listening, please don't assume that I am shaming or being disrespectful to the event, because the event was beautiful. Oh my gosh, the drumming and the saging and the smudging and the beautiful positive works that were there were all super wonderful. I was a little disappointed with the food choices, and I loved the speakers and their shares. But everywhere I go, I was actually really thinking of trying to put together the $500 to go to this eco-village on their weekend, October 18th to the 20th, which will be unnamed. And when I saw the children eating, 3 servings of cheese on their plate, I thought, I know to do the observation and the listening, because I want to shortcut how long it's going to take me to find a good fit. And so since I know myself and I put my knowledge into action, and I don't eat cheese and I don't eat dairy, and I know what happens to people that do. I lost interest in that particular opportunity, at least temporarily, and so certainly cheese doesn't just totally disqualify it, but it's a piece of it, okay? So now, why are people even more avoidant, and they only want to text and they only want to be behind a screen? If I ask them to come on the video, they're like, oh, no, 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 no. Well, my goodness, look at me. I'm 35 pounds overweight, and with stabilizing heroin addiction on a daily basis, I'm acutely aware of organ theft and the agendas, and so I'm telling you, it was intense, and we're now almost 2 weeks into me stabilizing. So with gathering, stabilizing is part number 2. Stabilizing is all about, I'm live right now. Stabilizing is all about making sure that you can get your energy back together, that you're able to lay down and get rest, that you're able to get back onto your supplement regime and get onto your diet. Bless up. Good to see you, Dana, Brother Dana. So we're talking a little bit about avoidant, depressed behaviors in people and how they're escalating. But a big part of this that's coming after we just mentioned gathering and stabilization is that the cell phone towers that are 5G are actually compromising your health, if you don't know that, and I'm aware that Dana and Kim that you do, but they send out a type of signaling that is a radio frequency pulsing activity, so it's going on while you're sleeping. That's why you want to especially unplug your modems, your routers, while you're in all the Wi-Fi to your home before you lay down to go to sleep, especially if you do floor sleeping like I do, because the currents travel along the floor. But so now let's take another glaring example. With more and more of the dogs that you see with the electronic collars around their neck, and I see them on the walks, I see them in the dog parks, I see them just about everywhere I go because I have dogs and I'm out every day. There's a little box attached to the collar. Now, if you were a dog, you may not want to be beeped or pulsed or electrically shocked. I wouldn't. And I think that if I had property and say it was, 20 or 50 acres or something, and the dog had a little beep and it needed, we couldn't fence that whole property, maybe that would be a rare instance where you would need an electronic collar around a dog's neck. But just consider for a moment that you have been swallowing RFID chips in the food that you've been eating. You've been injected, so there's insertions with the vaccines that you've taken in. Okay, I have not had vaccines for well over 20 years, but there are micro nanoparticles inside many of those vaccines. And so if you'll stop and consider for just a moment what I've been teaching for many years, which is this is a behavioral health system. This is mind control. This is certainly also tricknology, or you may call it technology. But stop for just a moment and consider that collar on the dog has a controller that the person can have on their phone or on a little clicker, right? It's separate. It's not on a line to the dog. You already have insertions. Most of you do. There's a very small percentage of people that are elders like myself that do not, that rejected vaccines, that rejected medications. They can also be put in when you're on a surgical table while you're under anesthesia. So as you see the hospitals develop more and more wings and centers for behavioral health, you see more of the juvenile detention centers, AJC, correction camps through the state agencies like This'll Do Minnesota. You see more and more social workers coming on board. You see more and more of the doctors specializing in behavioral health. But they're not going to touch the HTMA, the hair tissue testing, with a 10-foot pole. They're not going to look to see what your copper and zinc ratios, what your calcium and magnesium, what your sodium to potassium ratios are, because those are the spark plugs of your body. So since it's becoming too voluminous of a problem, meaning that there's people out there that are now, they can't manage the avoidant behavior and depressed and envious behaviors that I owned of my own, right? of my own, having to put the Game Boy in my son's hand when he was very young, even working at Waldorf, okay? I kind of doubted that maybe what Steiner had to say in anthroposophy was correct. But anthroposophy is correct. Those devices, my father used to have a vise in the garage, and he would put a tool or something he was working on, and he would tighten the vise, okay? And the vise would hold an object in its place so my father could work on it. My father would fix the fence, the electronics, the electrical, the car. You know, he would study and become an HVAC guy. When he was told that he was too dumb to do anything else because he became a father, he had dogs, and he wanted to apply himself and become a good husband and father, right? So these cell phone towers, don't kid yourself. These are behavioral health. You're already chipped, okay? And they can be turned on, and they are turned on intermittently, okay? That's why you were hearing tested when you were a young child, and they put the little headphones on you, and you were in school, and they would give you, you would hear those little tones, and you'd have to raise your hand if you heard the little tones. Been talking about this for at least 25 years, okay? That was not to help you. Bless up, Tonsu. Good to see you, brother. So that was not to help you. That's because this is a behavioral health modification. So now they've used medications, psychotropics, heavy-duty drugs that have suppressed your amygdala, that is your center of fear, because your limbic system that contains many centers in your brain would have reacted predictably that you should be under a state of fear, right? You should be under a state of fear because you know that you're not getting your minerals, so you're eating excessively, trying to get your minerals, and we've got all of these places around here that are serving you glue and starch and chemicals and colorants, and your body can't handle it anymore. So you become anxious, depressed, you end up with hearing aids, eyeglasses, acne, cysts in your body, until eventually you go into cancer. Now, if you read some of the PubMed articles, you read the medical research, excuse me, you'll find out that when your selenium, iron, copper, and zinc levels are compromised, your body will predictably go into cancer. So one of the reasons why I said screw the blood testing the majority of the time, and I brought on hair tissue testing, was specifically for the reason that I wanted to get people real medicine for a fraction of the cost in a painless way. Bless up, good to see you. Good to see you, Brother Kofi. Good to see you, Christy. So I wanted to bring you something that I knew would reveal the root cause. Something that for $135, and I send you the kit via mail, you're going to get an email 10 to 12-page report back. Now, what is your metabolic type? It's either a slow 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's a fast 1, 2, 3, or 4. You're being bombarded with these cell phone towers. You have been fed foods that have compromised your mineral balance, okay? I can't hear. I really don't understand. Can anybody else hear me? Kim, can you hear me, sis? Can you give me a thumbs up? It could be that we've got someone else in the room across the street, but I doubt it. Okay, so let me continue. These cell phone towers are being erected as your policing because they know that humans are not going to be able to police you any longer. They know that you're getting hip to the fact that they love killing brown and black people, that they love, police do not love killing brown and black people. Some people have warped ideas, and there have been misuse and abuse of power by a great many people that work for police departments all across the country. There's also great people. There's been wonderful people in Duluth that I've come across, so let me not make a glittering generality. The cell phone towers are set up as a means of behavioral health so that they can correct you, and they are implementing, trying that grid right now. So let me see. Hopefully Christy's coming back on. Oh, we saw another person jump on. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, but avoidant behaviors are where they don't want to go outside. They don't meet you face to face and talk. My neighbor's standing here right now. You can say hello. He just walked up because I'm sitting over here in my car. It's a beautiful night. Cannot hear. I don't know what the deal is here. Let's see. Can you guys hear me now? Can you guys hear me now? It might have been that the volume went down on my phone. Okay. Video disappeared now. Come back in a minute. Oh my goodness. Okay guys, I'm going to see what I can get rid of.